In fact, I think we've been sending these jobs overseas, and we've got more and more dependence on China, more and more dependence on the Middle East. There have been some widespread benefits. Everybody gets cheaper spatulas at Walmart. But there have been a lot of people that have lost those jobs. Now, Mike says we've gained a lot of jobs. We've done very well with the automobile industry. But if you're a textile worker, you're not likely working in the automobile industry. You were making $14, $15 an hour, and now you're making minimum wage. You're driving 45 minutes to work. You don't have benefits or pensions. And for the most part, you're working in the service industry. Mike doesn't seem to think that's a problem. Mike also said in April that markets aren't bad. They're just bad feelings. I just don't think that's the case with our economy. He's also said that he doesn't think that the Iraq war had any effect on our economy. I think we've got to do more to create jobs in Alabama, and a little bit later on I'll say how I think we can do that.
Congressman Rogers.
Well, I would make the point that, first of all, with the Iraq war, that is not the reason we're having the economic challenges we face as a country right now. Those are market forces that have nothing to do with the Iraq war. It has to do with our mortgage crisis in this country. And we all need to recognize as a country, this is a tough time for us. What happened over the last 2 weeks in Washington, I think, was very sobering for all of us. And we need to be mindful of the challenges going forward, that this is not over. We're still going to have some tough times. But trade, we need to make sure that we have fair trade in this country. I have been for trade deals that were good for us. I have opposed multiple trade deals like the Morocco Free Trade Agreement, the Haitian, the Oman, the Colombia. All these trade agreements that were bad for us, I opposed. But if they were good for Alabama, like CAFTA, I supported them. So you need to look at the net effect. And when you come to the CAFTA vote, we had agriculture's number one industry in our state. A lot of agricultural folks have come to say, I need this vote. The Alabama Business Council, our local business dealers, everybody, the manufacturers are saying, we got to have this passed, and we did.
Question here, Congressman Rogers will answer first. Because of the current economic crisis, Congress will no doubt tighten the belt on spending. What education initiative would you hold flat or cut, and how would you explain your decision to the students and teachers and parents affected?
Well, I don't think that the funding that we're going to hold flat is necessarily going to be in education. First and foremost, most education spending comes from the state and local levels. And the states are facing some real economic challenges right now as a direct consequence of what's happening in our economy. You're going to hear a lot more about that in the coming days. But we still have to better fund No Child Left Behind. That has been a program that was federally driven, that really had some good consequences, and that we've got some accountability now that's we needed. But it really wasn't funded well enough, and I think we need to do a better job at that. So when we talk about reducing our federal spending, I'm looking a lot more at waste, fraud, and abuse that we've got, and not so much in taking federal money away from our current educational programs. I think those can, at a minimum, remain level and probably be increased.
Mr. Segall?
Again, I think you're going to see congressmen all over the country who voted for this bailout try to claim that it's going to have no effect on our economy. We just spent almost $1 trillion on the bailout. We spent about $1 trillion on the war in Iraq, and Mike's going to try to tell you that it's not going to have any effect and he's not going to have to cut anything. This is the same person who, over his years in Congress, really has not been a budget hawk. I'm a fiscal conservative. Mike has voted 6 times against rules known as pay-as-you-go, meaning that before you spend a dime extra, you got to cut something. Mike has been against that. He's raised the debt ceiling 3 times. He's just not been a fiscal conservative in any way. I believe we are going to have to cut some things, but I believe we've got to invest in education and health care and infrastructure if we want to be able to create jobs. That's where I'd focus, and that's the way to get the economy on track. The waste is giving everybody $600 and expecting that to fix the economy. That's something that Mike has supported. Of course, I just want to say one other thing, and that is gas prices are up, food prices are up. The economy was in bad shape before we had this financial crisis.
One more question, Mr. Segall answering first. Let's talk about the water war. For more than 20 years, 3 states, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, involved in a battle over water rights, rivers crossing state lines. Though this is a state issue, what could you do or would you do to ensure that Alabama gets its fair share of water?
It's a federal issue. It's a federal issue because it's regulated by the Army Corps of Engineers. Now, I run a program in Tuscaloosa where we try to get schools to buy their food from farmers. And when we first put on our farmers market, we had a drought, and we couldn't get enough farmers. We lost 40% of the crop in East Alabama. The drought is not a nature problem, it's an infrastructure problem. We got more water in Alabama than almost any other state in the country. We got 7 million acres of land we used to farm. If we went back to farming that land, if we had basic irrigation infrastructure, 3 million acres is more valuable than the whole of the automobile industry. And in 2009, we're going to be the leading manufacturers in the country of automobiles. I would stand up on this issue every single day in Congress, and I don't think Mike can tell you he's done a single thing to make it so that we'd have more water. In fact, he voted against the Farm Bill the first time it came up, which has a program in it to allow people to build reservoirs. So I would stand up on this issue. Mike hadn't done anything to stand up against us, against Georgia for us.
Congressman Rogers.
Well, my opponent's right in the first instance. This is in federal courts, and that's where it's going to be decided. The Corps of Engineers has tried to make some manual changes that in their regulations that might disadvantage Alabama, and we have fought those off to date. But you know, he makes a good point in that we do have some infrastructure improvements that we need to make. He is completely wrong on the Farm Bill. I voted for the Farm Bill, and in fact, I voted to override the President's veto of the Farm Bill twice. The first version that came out had over $50 billion in new taxes in it, which is why we voted down that first version. But I'm a member of the Agriculture Committee, voted that bill out of committee, and then when we got the taxes stripped out, voted twice to override President Bush's veto of that Farm Bill because it's so important to our state. But I want you to understand about this infrastructure need. We do need to build more reservoir capacity in East Alabama, help our farmers when we're having tough times like we had last year. That's going to have federal assistance, and I've been a co-sponsor along with Terry Everett to try to get that legislation in place to help support the construction of that kind of infrastructure.
Gentlemen, we ask now for your closing statements with Congressman Rogers going first. 30 seconds, please.
Well, thank you very much. I think when we look at the tough times that we face as a nation right now, economically and otherwise, we all know that we need experience. You're going to decide on November 4th who you want to be your advocate in Washington. You can either hire a very young, zealous advocate who really wants to do a good job for you, but really has no experience, or you can elect somebody who was first elected 22 years ago at the local level, served in the state legislature and in Congress for the last 6 years, has been an experienced and effective advocate for you. I think in these times, experience matters.
Mr. Segall.
This election is about economic potential. When you look at experience, you got to ask, what has experience got you? Does everybody here know that we have more waste from our timber industry in Alabama that we could turn into fuel than Iowa has corn? We have unlimited economic potential if we put in the infrastructure to be able to grow our economy. We have bad roads and bridges. We got 1,200 bridges that can't hold a school bus, and that's the reason we don't have refineries